To the ones who gave everything and were left holding the silence. To the ones whose loyalty was seen as weakness. To the ones who weren't too much, just too real in a world addicted to masks. This is for you. You don't need to speak. I already know the story. The aching in your chest that never got a name. The nights you stared at the ceiling, not hoping they'd come back. Just wondering if you were ever real to them at all. You weren't forgotten because you were forgettable. You were forgotten because they feared remembering. Because your presence held a mirror they couldn't look into for too long. It showed them everything they were pretending not to be. You loved like fire, but they only knew how to hold shadows. You stayed when it rained, and they vanished the moment the sun hit its face. And when they walked away, it wasn't with sorrow. It was with ease, as if you were dust to be shaken off, as if you were never the shelter they ran to when the world turned cruel. You were left, but not because you lacked value. You were left because you carried too much truth, too much depth, too much soul. And in a world that thrives on surface, you were the ocean, terrifying, endless, honest. They didn't know what to do with someone like you. Someone who saw through the lies they wore like perfume. Someone who stayed long after it stopped benefiting them. You weren't convenient. You were constant. And they only knew how to keep what asks nothing of them. So they vanished, quietly, left you to clean up the wreckage of emotions they never planned to take with them. No closure, no apology, just silence, a blade without blood. And maybe you started to believe them, started to think the love you gave was too heavy, that if they could leave so easily, maybe you really were the problem. No, that's the first lie we bury tonight. They didn't walk away from a burden. They walked away from a blessing. And that blessing was you. You were never the weak one. You were never too much. You were simply misplaced in the hands of people too small to hold you. This is not the beginning of healing. Healing assumes you were broken. No, this is the beginning of awakening. The moment you stop asking why they did it and start remembering who you were before they tried to erase you. You're not here to move on. You're here to rise, like fire from wet ashes, like silence, louder than every scream they tried to mute. You're not alone. You were never alone. You are one of the rare ones, the quiet few who loved like warriors and bled like poets. This voice you hear now, it isn't mine. It's yours, the one they tried to bury beneath their absence, the one that never stopped whispering beneath your grief. You are still here, and you have not been defeated. Let the world sleep. Let the liars rest. Let the cowards keep pretending they didn't feel what they threw away. You're not here to chase. You're here to become. You didn't lose them. You escaped a curse. And now, you remember. They didn't leave because you failed them. They left because they were never built to stay where truth lived. You showed them a kind of love that didn't ask for applause. A devotion that stood still when everything else ran. And they mistook that stillness for weakness. They mistook your loyalty for lack of options. They mistook your silence for emptiness, not realizing it was restraint, power, depth. You were never asking too much. You were simply offering what they could never return. So they did what cowards do. They reduced you to convenience, then decided you were replaceable. Like furniture moved out of a room, they made space for something easier, something that didn't challenge their comfort, something that wouldn't expose the hollowness they dressed up as happiness. And when they left, they didn't even flinch. No explanation, no closure, just absence dressed as peace. They walked away like your heart was just a phase they outgrew. That's what stung, wasn't it? Not just that they left, but how easily they did it. How quickly they acted like you never existed. like everything you gave was some fever dream they woke up from. But it was real. You were real, and they knew it. That's why they had to run. You were too much mirror in a house full of illusion, too much storm in a life built on clouds. You reminded them of their unhealed wounds, not because you caused them, but because you refused to hide yours. And so they labeled you dramatic, overthinking, too intense. All because you felt, all because you saw. The truth is, you walked into their life with open hands, and they spat in them, not because they didn't want love, but because they didn't know what to do with something they couldn't control. You were never broken. You were just seen by the blind. And what the blind can't understand, they discard. They thought they could replace you with noise, quick smiles, shallow words, skin without soul. But what they didn't realize was this. You weren't just a person. You were a presence. You were the echo of something ancient and unrepeatable, and once lost, never found again. They chose the easy exit and called it peace. But peace doesn't haunt people in the middle of the night. Peace doesn't linger in photographs. Peace doesn't show up in the scent of someone else's skin and whisper your name. What they called freedom was the beginning of their curse. And what you thought was abandonment was the divine act of removal, not for their sake, for yours. They betrayed you in silence, but you heard every scream in that stillness, every lie behind their smile, every truth they couldn't carry. You weren't left. You were unloaded by someone who never deserved the weight of you in the first place. So remember this. You didn't get replaced. You got revealed. And what they lost wasn't just love. They lost access to something sacred. They lost you. They smiled when they let you go, as if they had outgrown something unworthy, as if walking away from your storm somehow made them the calm. There was no hesitation in their step, no flicker of doubt in their eyes. They believed they were trading in rust for gold, confusing the shine of the surface with the value of what lies beneath. You watched it happen, the quiet, rehearsed distance, the shrug disguised as maturity, the hollow explanations that sounded more like alibis than truth. But what burned the most wasn't that they left. It was the way they made it look so easy, as if you were nothing more than a chapter they regretted writing, as if your presence had weighed them down, and their life now unburdened could finally begin. They posted their freedom like a badge, smiled in rooms you used to fill, laughed louder in places where your silence still echoed. They wore joy like makeup, thick, performative, quick to smear when no one's watching. They believed the lie they told themselves, that you were the problem, that leaving you meant peace, that what you gave wasn't rare, just common, overplayed, disposable. Delusion is a drug, and they overdosed on it. They called it clarity. They called it growth. But underneath it all, it was fear. Because deep down, they knew. They felt it even as they deleted the messages, even as they blocked the number, even as they rehearsed the narrative where you were too much. They knew what they were walking away from. They just didn't believe they'd ever miss it. They mistook your honesty for volatility, your presence for pressure, your loyalty for possession, because they couldn't tell the difference between being held and being caged. They thought they could find better, easier, lighter. And maybe they did at first. Maybe it felt like freedom, like they had finally escaped something too deep, too demanding, too real. But the truth has a long breath, and it waits. It waits until the high wears off, until the noise fades, until the next person looks them in the eye and offers them a diluted version of what you gave so fiercely. That's when they'll remember. Not because they want to, but because memory doesn't ask for permission. You weren't abandoned. You were released from blindness. You were mistaken for a burden, but you were the blessing. You were the weight that kept them from drifting into nothingness. And now, without you, they're lighter and emptier. Let them keep smiling. Let them keep posting. Let them keep pretending the wound is a choice. You don't need to interrupt their illusion, because illusions, by nature, collapse. And when they do, they don't fall quietly. The same ease with which they let you go will one day become the shame they carry in silence. Not because you begged to stay, but because you never looked back. And that is what they'll never understand. How they mistook their victory for a funeral they're still walking away from. Time has no loyalty to masks. It peels them back inch by inch until only the raw face remains. The one they swore they'd never let you see. But it doesn't matter anymore, because you're gone, and the truth stayed behind like a shadow nailed to their heels. At first, it all felt like freedom to them. The open doors, the lightness, the illusion that they had finally let go of a weight. But the weight was never you. The weight was their cowardice. And now they carry it alone. They laughed louder when you left, told the story in ways that painted them as the hero. Of course, they did. Liars always speak first. But time waits for the echoes to fade. And then it begins. It's slow, cruel work. The nights grow longer. The distractions lose their flavor. The faces they chased begin to blend together. Smiling shells without the soul they once held in their hands. And what once felt like power now feels like hunger. Unfed, unfulfilled, unforgiving. Every new voice they entertain reminds them of yours in all the wrong ways. The warmth isn't there. The depth is missing. The silence feels colder now, because it doesn't come with your kind of peace. It comes with absence, an echo where a fire used to be. They scroll through photos with faces that don't know them, sleep beside bodies that don't understand them. And somewhere in the cracks of those artificial smiles, a question begins to form. Did I let go of something real? But it's not a question they speak aloud, because speaking it would mean undoing the story where you were the storm and they were the survivor. But storms don't stay to clean up. You did. And now, every storm they walk through without you feels more like punishment than weather. They thought they walked away clean, but the truth doesn't let go so easily. It seeps in. It watches. It waits. Time doesn't chase. It circles. And now, the very things they ran toward begin to rot in their hands. What looked like gold begins to chip. What sounded like joy becomes noise. And what once felt like liberation now feels like floating in a void. They don't talk about you anymore, but you are there, in the pauses, in the locked phone screens, in the way they flinch at songs that used to mean nothing, until they started meaning everything. You were never the weak one. You were the rare one, and rarity doesn't echo. It haunts. The truth is not loud. It doesn't scream in their face. It whispers. It waits for mirrors. It shows up at 3:00 a.m. when the room is dark and the mask is off, and no one is left to lie to, not even themselves. And in that silence, they remember, not in pieces, but all at once. Everything they thought they replaced, everything they thought they escaped, everything they convinced themselves didn't matter was you. And by the time they understand what they lost, you're already long gone. Not bitter, not broken, just untouchable. That's the price of illusion. It shatters slow, but when it does, it never stops cutting. Regret doesn't knock. It seeps in through the cracks. through the places they thought were sealed shut with distraction and denial. It doesn't scream. It waits until the world is quiet, until the lights are off, until their own thoughts are the only voices left. Then it begins, not with pain, with remembrance, a scent in the air, a song they forgot still knew your name, a certain kind of silence, the kind you used to fill effortlessly, just by being there. It starts slow, like a shiver in warm air. They laugh with someone else, and halfway through, they hear you in the cadence, in the pause, in the absence. Every new hand they hold feels colder than yours, even when it's warm, because your touch didn't just meet skin, it understood it. They go on. Of course they do, because life doesn't stop for guilt. It lets it rot in motion. But there is a ghost in their house now, and it isn't you. It's them, the version of them that once held something rare and let it slip through like it was nothing more than smoke. You were never the one who disappeared. You were removed by your own survival, by the divine hand that pulls light out of places where it's being dimmed. Now they sit with strangers, trying to recreate the fire they extinguished. They pour their stories into cups that can't hold water, and every time someone fails to understand them, they remember you, how you saw their storm and stayed, how you read their silence like scripture, how you forgave what even they couldn't name. And that's the part that claws the deepest. Not that they lost someone, but that they lost you. The one who stayed when it wasn't convenient. The one who saw the broken pieces and chose to stay anyway. Not to fix them, but to honor them. They don't cry for you. Pride won't let them. But their chest aches in places that used to be numb, and nothing they chase can soothe it. Because nothing they chase is you. They scroll through old photos, pretend they're just looking for something else. But they pause on the ones where you're laughing, where your eyes are speaking things you never said out loud. And for a second, just a second, they feel it again, that home. But homes don't stand forever when the foundation is betrayal. They burned it, and now they walk in ruins, searching for the door they nailed shut with their silence, not realizing you took the key when you left. There's no going back. And that silence? It wasn't surrender. It was sentencing, because they were prepared for the war. They had the speeches, the justifications, the blame. They were ready to twist your love into a weapon and call it your fault. But you never gave them the chance. You left the battlefield empty and let them fight their own reflection instead. They expected rage. You gave them absence. And that is a pain no apology can reach. You didn't write the final paragraph. You just stopped turning the pages. Now they sit with a story that ends mid-sentence, and it tortures them more than any scream ever could. Your silence became a mirror, a cold, endless surface that reflects who they truly are, without your warmth to distort the image, without your forgiveness to soften the lines, and without your presence to excuse the lies. They don't know how to live in that kind of quiet. They don't know how to carry the weight of what they weren't brave enough to hold, so they pretend they feel nothing. But silence is not nothing. It's everything they buried, trying to forget you. Every room they walk into without you echoes differently now. Not louder, emptier. They feel your shape in spaces you never even stood. They taste your name in moments where it doesn't belong. Because when someone becomes your peace, their absence becomes your punishment. You didn't ghost them. You became unreachable. Not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you finally chose yourself. And that is a betrayal they never prepared for. They can't message absence. They can't argue with silence. They can't win a war with someone who refused to fight. Because you already won. You left. And now, they live in the hollow you left behind. They sit with people who don't know the music of your laugh and try to feel full with conversations that never touch their soul. They hear your name in places they swore you'd never matter. And in that moment, they feel it. The void. The one you didn't create. The one they carved with their own hands when they let you go. You never had to become their enemy. You became their memory. And that is far worse. Because enemies can be fought, but memories, they follow. They sleep beside them, whisper in their ears. Look them in the eyes through the people they try to love next. Let them ache. Let them wonder if you ever think of them. Let them sit in the silence they chose, never realizing it would scream louder than anything you ever said. This was never revenge. This was evolution. You didn't vanish to teach them a lesson, but your absence became the lesson anyway. And the beauty of it all, you didn't have to lift a single finger. You became the punishment by simply refusing to be touched by them again. You didn't heal. You transformed. Healing implies a return, a restoration of what was. But you were never meant to go back. What broke wasn't rebuilt. It was reborn, not out of spite, not for vengeance, but because pain, when carried long enough, stops asking for justice and becomes something else entirely. It becomes you, sharper, quieter, clearer. You didn't climb out of the fire. You became it. And now, you carry the burn in your bones, not as a scar, but as armor. They took your softness, so you turned it into steel, not to hurt them, but to ensure no one would ever have the chance again. Your silence is no longer a wound. It's a shield. Your distance, not coldness, but control. You don't chase anymore. You choose. And what you choose now is peace. Not the kind that needs validation. Not the kind that seeks to be seen, but the kind that stands alone and doesn't flinch. You are no longer tethered to their opinion. You don't wait for the apology. You don't check for their shadow, because shadows do not define the sun. And you've become light that answers to no one. They were a trigger, but they were never the weapon. The real weapon was who you became when they were gone. This new you doesn't speak in desperation. This new you doesn't explain your worth. You've learned that silence says more than pleading ever could. And now, every step you take is deliberate. Every boundary, sacred. Every part of you once open and bleeding, now wrapped in elegance and quiet fire. You don't rise with noise. You rise with presence. The kind that shifts rooms. The kind that doesn't beg be noticed, but cannot be ignored. You are still kind, but never again at your own expense. You are still open, but only to those who have earned the right to enter. And that door? It is locked with keys forged in the hell you survived. You are not healed. You are dangerously well, unshakable, untouched, and untouchable. This isn't the part of your story where they come back. This is the part where it wouldn't matter if they did, because the version of you that once needed them no longer exists. They will look for the old you. The one who would have waited, the one who would have answered. But that version died in the fire they thought would destroy you. And from it, you rose, not as revenge, not as bitterness, but as evolution, as elegance sharpened by experience, as strength sculpted in silence. This isn't about proving them wrong. You've outgrown the need to be understood by those who misjudged your worth. Now, you simply are a force, A presence. A phoenix cloaked in shadow, not trying to be seen, but impossible to ignore. You weren't a chapter in their story. You were the author they betrayed, the voice behind every page they pretended to write themselves, the hand that held the plot together, even when they forgot how to carry it. They didn't just walk away from someone who cared. They walked away from something unrepeatable, because what you gave wasn't common. It wasn't curated. It wasn't borrowed from someone else's soul. It was you, raw, real, whole. You loved them in a language they didn't even know they spoke, until you were gone, and every other voice began to sound foreign. They thought they could find better, but what they're chasing now isn't better. It's familiar. They look for pieces of you in people who only know how to touch the surface. They mimic your rhythm. They repeat your warmth in half measures. But imitation doesn't resurrect what they buried, because you weren't just love. You were legacy. There is a weight to what you offered. Not heavy, sacred. The kind of weight only those built for truth can carry. And they were not built for it. So they dropped it, fumbled it, called it too much, when in truth it was more than they could ever earn. Now they walk around with empty hands, pretending they're not looking, but searching all the same. Because somewhere in the hollow they created, a whisper keeps reminding them, that was it. That was the moment. That was the soul. You don't get twice. And the worst part, it wasn't stolen from them. They gave it away. Now they drink from cups that don't satisfy, touch skin that doesn't stir the soul, laugh with ghosts, kiss with absence, sleep next to bodies that feel more like silence than comfort. Because there's no refill for what you poured. There's no replacement for the storm that sang instead of screamed. No replica for the way you stayed, not for validation, but because your heart doesn't know how to abandon. They will try to rewrite you, to turn you into a mistake instead of a masterpiece. But every page they touch without you feels hollow, because the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to remain. And you remain, not in their life, but in their loss. A living reminder of what it means to have something real and let it rot in the name of ease. Let them call you difficult. Let them call you intense. That's how the ordinary speak of the unforgettable, with names that make them feel less small in your absence. You weren't perfect, but you were once in a lifetime. And now that you're gone, they know it. Not in words, in longing. In the kind of grief that doesn't scream, just sits in the chest and waits. You were the fire, the stillness, the mirror, the myth. And now, you are the thing they cannot replace, because you were never made to be found again. They smile in photos, but die in mirrors, because the world still believes the performance. But the mirror never claps for actors. Behind the teeth they bear is rot. Behind the light in their eyes is a flicker that keeps dimming, a candle gasping for air inside a room they sealed shut. You didn't break them. You didn't have to. Life has a way of peeling masks at midnight, and theirs is peeling slowly, one brittle corner at a time. The truth always arrives, dressed in silence, and now it whispers through every crack in their performance. Not to scream, but to haunt. They thought your distance was defeat, but it was deliverance. You didn't disappear. You evolved. You didn't chase closure. You became it. And them? They're still dancing in circles, hoping the echo of applause will drown out the truth. But you know the secret now. Justice doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears grace. Sometimes it walks barefoot and just keeps walking, because survival was your vengeance, because healing was your victory. You rose, not to be seen, but to see clearly. And now you move with a silence that echoes louder than any scream they ever gave you. They thought they buried you. They never realized you were soil, that you were the one thing that could grow from darkness, that what they tried to suffocate learned to breathe beneath rubble. You didn't shout your return. You let time do the talking. You let life take its course. And now it's theirs that spins in place. Hollow nights, fake smiles, stories retold too many times to keep sounding true. Meanwhile, you carry storms in your chest and peace in your stride. You became the lesson, not in words, but in what they will never hold again. And maybe the world won't know. Maybe no one claps when ghosts walk out of the fire. But you know, you feel it. Every step you take now is not on ground, but on the ashes of everything meant to destroy you. They sit in crowded rooms and feel lonelier than ever. You walk alone and feel cleaner than you've ever been. Because poetic justice doesn't need revenge. It just needs time. Time, and the kind of truth that never needed to be proven, only revealed. And now it has been. Let them scroll. Let them watch. Let them ache. Because now you don't speak. You exist. And that alone is punishment enough. You became the ghost they can't block, the silence they can't mute, the story they'll never finish reading. Because they burned the last chapter, thinking you'd beg to rewrite it. But you didn't. You became the page that refuses to be turned. Not stuck, etched, permanent, unerasable. You are no longer someone they left. You are someone they never recovered from. They follow your glow now, pretending they don't feel the burn, smiling through the same screens that show them everything they lost and can never touch again. They thought silence would erase you, but it crowned you. Because power doesn't roar. It watches. It waits. It knows. You were never the lesson. You were the consequence. And now they witness what they discarded become untouchable. They see what they mocked rise in stillness. They hear the echo of your name in the spaces they swore were better without you. But you're already gone. Not in distance, in depth. You don't walk among them anymore. You hover. You're not healing. You've transformed. You are the quiet they can't compete with. The memory that rewrites itself in their sleep. The presence that lingers long after the door has closed. And no, you won't look back, because there's nothing there for you. Just the hollow frame of people who thought they won, while you were building empires inside your silence. They'll tell themselves you didn't matter, but their eyes betray them. Their scrolling betrays them. Their patterns, their pauses, their pulse, all betray them. You were the mirror. You were the storm. You were the one thing they couldn't fake. Now they watch in silence, like the audience of a play they once starred in, before the lights shifted and the script forgot their name. Let them sit. Let them scroll. Let them ache. Because now you are the echo they can't outrun. And they are the curse. You escaped forever.